Good morning, everyone. Welcome to TechBBQ. I hope you had a wonderful last night. With me today, I have an extraordinary smart people on the panel, and also what I think the best-looking panel, honestly, to say the least. Luke, welcome.
Thank you.
How was last night?
Last night was great. We were chatting before, and my voice is a little bit hoarse because we had some karaoke singing that took place. So apologize if my voice is a little scratchy, but it's always great to come to the Nordics, and certainly here in Copenhagen, the energy, it's been really, really great. So,
Luke, speaking of singing, what is not on your resume? What can we not Google about you?
So something maybe people don't maybe know about me is we were just talking about Spotify Wrapped, and each of the last 3 years, Taylor Swift has been my #1 artist. She got engaged this week, big news. But yeah, I'm a big Swiftie, and last night was a lot of Taylor Swift in the playlist, so maybe you wouldn't have guessed if you see me on the street, but I am a big Swift fan.
Thank you, Luke. Wonderful. Sophia, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
An operational VC, you've done it. You walked all those miles in an early stage startup. What is not on your resume, and how was last night for you?
Last night was great. We had this dinner, and I met some incredible people. I was not singing as much as you did, and that is much because I don't have a great singing voice. But what's not on my resume on the music theme is that I was trained a classical guitarist. So from 8 years old to 18, I was practicing almost every day. So that was my secret skill as a kid. But today I think I would be more excited talking to people about my gardening skills. I'm a very nerdy gardener.
And it's good for the nervous system as well, I think, to be out in the nature.
It's like meditation. And it's incredible to see seeds grow from something small like this into an incredible flower.
Very aligned with your work as a VC, thank you. And of course, Luke is in UK and Sophia is in Sweden. Bastian also in UK. How was last night for you?
Very quiet in my room working, unfortunately. So not as exciting like as Luke's and Sophia's.
What is not on your resume?
It's quite the opposite to Luke and Sophia. I think I'm the least talented person when it comes to music. I'm not even allowed to sing at home at my parents' place. And I've never been to a concert in my life.
Never,
so
even once?
Nope.
Gonna change that.
I invited him to Coldplay next week, and I have a free ticket, and he was like, nope, I'm not going, so.
You will be biking instead, right?
With Luke.
Absolutely. As you can hear, this is a very friendly panel. Most of you guys know each other, work together, have done tons of deals together. I live in Palo Alto, and I arrived in Denmark. I'm from Denmark, but I live in US. One of the things that I really see a lot is the almost negativity around US, right? We want to block US, we want to boycott US, we don't like Trump, it's all bad. My 3 panelists today are very experienced in doing business both in US and Europe. And Luke, you actually grew up in US and then moved to Europe. So today we will have a frank and honest conversation about what can we learn from US and what can US learn from Europe, and also what is the outlook, what does it look like? Bastian, I would actually like to start with you because congratulations on Figma, the IPO. Congratulations, it was not your personal investment, but you took part of it and have been following closely. Honestly speaking, Figma took 6-7 years before there was even remotely anything that looked like a product market fit and no revenue. That's a tough one to sell in Europe because when you pitch in Europe, all they ask about is traction, KPIs, revenue, who's your first backer, what's the first check, who's with you, and then it's uphill from there. What is so extraordinary with Figma?
Well, I think Figma for us is the archetype of investment that we like to do. We partnered with Figma when there was just an idea in the team. So it was Dylan and Evan. And what was really special about Figma and why we decided to partner so early on is that they had an incredible clarity about who they are as people and where they want to go. And that's a clarity that you very rarely see, but what we are always looking for, especially in a 19-year-old guy, to have that clarity is something that's very special. And I think ultimately, if you build conviction in the team, if they have clarity of where they want to go, you have to trust the process. I mean, first you trust the people and then you trust the process. And sometimes it can take several years until the first product is launched. And it was not unexpected. We knew that they will take their time. They were very intentional about like really embracing the craft and building something that really hits a note when they launch it. So it didn't come as a surprise, and we really trusted the people and therefore the process.
So you would say Figma is a poster startup for Index Ventures. This is what you're looking for, these kind of people.
Yeah, for us, I think Figma it just reinforced our thesis that we had from the very start. At Index, we always say it's all about the people. Therefore, we don't care whether a company is started in Europe, in the US, or elsewhere. In our opinion, the best entrepreneurs can come from anywhere. And it's really the people that we have to build conviction in. And I think Figma is a fantastic example of that.
Thank you. Sophia, Spotify, you were amongst the very first employees. It was a big risk for you to join a team at that point of time, right? Because there was really just a big mess, right? And again, also no revenue, as far as I know, not even a narrative or a strong story. But you turned that all around, and then fast forward, it's one of the most incredible stories coming out of the Nordics. So would you be able to spot the next Spotify here, you think?
Yeah, I think it was not a big mess, but it was very, very early. So we were around 8 to 10 people in a small flat, so we didn't have a product yet. We didn't have any licensing deals. We didn't really have crafted a story, but we had one thing coming back to the people. We had 2 founders that were incredibly in tune with how is the behavior online gonna look like in a couple of years. And at that time, if you were typing in and wanted to play music online, that was not solved. So if you typed, like a Virgin with Madonna, you would get photos, articles, clippings, but not a way to press play and actually hear the music. So that was the core problem that we wanted to solve. And I think that clarity within the founders' sort of vision for the company was what made me, take that chance. And I feel like they have a really, really good ability to get people excited. And that is kind of probably where I learned and what I look for when I meet founders today. Then, of course, as always, there's so many things you need to overcome and do, and that's why we sometimes joke about that. Running a startup is like a roller coaster. Every second day, you think you're gonna, not get the licensing deal done, or the product is not as strong as you think, or can it scale for 50 million people? You have all these very hard problems that you're solving. But we were also always coming back to that. The amount of problems that you're solving is adding up to the value of the company that you're building. So a problem is not a problem. A problem is just a way to become a more valuable company. And to your point, if I think that we can spot it today, I think definitely. Back then, this was 2007, the ecosystem in Stockholm was not really flourishing. We didn't have many angels. There were VCs, of course, and I'm super happy that they dared to back us. But today, we have this incredible community. Just look at this event. We have 10,000 people coming to Denmark. We have Slush in Finland. We have Tech Arena in Stockholm. We have people that have also made exits that are operational angels that want to contribute to the ecosystem and give back. So I think the chances that we're spotting the next Spotify today are much bigger than what it was 2007.
Thank you for saying that, Sophia, and I think it's a beautiful segue over to you, Luke, because US and Europe, you grew up in the American system, and I raised my rounds in US. I never raised VC capital in Europe. But I do see that the hurdles a European founder has to go through, the rounds are smaller, the valuations are smaller, the investors are more unexperienced, there is not a lot of angels. What do you see are the biggest differences between raising in US and in Europe? And can we actually just relax and avoid US? Just don't do business with US at the moment. Is that even an option?
Okay, I'll take the last question I'll talk about first. I don't think, if you're going to build a category-defining company, on the order of what a Figma has become or what Spotify is today, I don't think it's possible to ignore the US. We get asked a lot of times by founders at the seed or Series A stage, should I move my company to the US? My feedback is, I think at that part of the company building journey, you need to focus on your competitive advantage. And if you have a network in the US, it makes sense to move there. There's great talent. There's, I think, favorable policy to build your company. And there's access to capital. But you have those things here in Europe now. I think maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that wasn't the case. But now there's I mean, several US funds. We opened our office in London 3 years ago. We're investing across Europe today. Several of our peers who have also done the same thing. So there is growth capital now to the same effect that you would find in the US. There's also experienced operators. Sophia talked about the Spotify story. How many people that you worked with at Spotify are now amazing hires for that next generation of companies, right? That's talent that is here in Europe that you can hire, where 20 years ago you had to go to the US to find those people. And then the third thing I would say is, you know, if you look at the founder networks in the US, people who have exited their companies, those angels, they become super angels. And when you're, let's say you're a student at a university or you're an employee at a company, you have an idea for a product, but you don't have maybe a track record of being a founder before, you don't really know how to pitch your company yet, an angel is the person who's going to help you that first 3 or 4 months, where you give you like the 100, 200K for you to take time away from your company and go all in on your idea. And that to me has been one of the missing pieces in the European market. And as I look at across the landscape of companies today, look at names like Revolut, Klarna, some of these large names that where liquidity is in the pipe, there are going to be a whole crop of angels coming. And I think that's going to accelerate the number of companies that you see here in Europe. But I do recommend to founders like either the seed and Series A stage, focus on where you have a competitive advantage. I think at Series B and beyond, now if you're going to be a category defining company, you need to have a presence in the US. Whether that's a sales team, whether that's you know, an engineering team, but growing an office there is I think an important thing. But you can absolutely build companies that are HQ here in Europe. We have a handful in our portfolio. You look at companies like Sauna Labs in Stockholm, Synthesia in London, started by 2 Danish founders. You know, if you talk to those founders, they care a lot about building in Europe and having their company here, because this is where they were raised, this is you know, their community, and they want to be an example to that next generation of founder. So my advice is, I think, focus on your competitive advantage, but then to become global, it is an important thing. And that's where working with a fund, like any of the here on the stage, we have, you know, all 3 of our funds have ties, not just in Europe, but have networks across the globe to help founders grow and scale. So,
thank you, Luke. Yeah, thank you. As we spoke about before we got on stage here, Sophia, you did mention that almost once a week you felt like Spotify could have had a death experience every week. Yeah. And Luke, last night, to be fair, you ended up partying, but before you partied, you were trying to rescue a company that would have otherwise have died tomorrow. Fair to say? Yeah? Fair to say. Yeah. And Bastian, you locked yourself up in a room working because you were focusing on your deals. So what is it that we don't know behind the stages? Because we only read the stories when companies launch or they raise big rounds, and we read about it in TechCrunch and the information and whatnot. But what is the true story right now? How is the landscape right now for founders? Is it hard, harder, hard as always? Is it easier? And what about AI? How is that being put into the workflows now if you're not AI first? Whatever you want to choose answering, who wants to go first?
I'm happy to start with a few thoughts. If you look at the fundraising landscape right now, I think what is happening is I see a consolidation happening in the market. AI is unquestionably the hottest category right now. And there are some very high-flying companies that have AI as a core part of the product that are raising mega rounds. They're also growing faster than any companies have grown in the past. As a consequence, like, we all look for very similar things in companies. We want high growth, we want great teams, we want big markets, amazing products. And what's happening, our world is increasingly digital now, and communication is increasingly easier and easier. So that means that we're all finding those same companies. And the focus on that caliber of company is intense. The longer tail of company, I think, is a lot harder to fundraise for. So in our fund, like, we are, as all of us on stage are, we're very active investors. When we invest, we then spend time the next 10 years working with those founders to help build their companies. If I look at our funds and some of our older funds, some investments we've been in for 5 or 6 years, companies that are trying to raise now that aren't AI native, for example, amazing teams, really good product, they don't have maybe the same caliber of growth. You could raise for those companies 5 years ago. It is a lot harder today, to answer your question. And those are the stories you don't see in the media, because we all want to gravitate to the success stories. But there's a lot of companies out there that I think are having a hard time to fundraise. It is also a reality of the market that, you know, the way venture capital works, we raise funds from LPs to then invest in the market. When those companies exit, we recycle that money back to our LPs, and the fund starts again. But the last 10 years has been, until Figma now and a handful of other liquidity events this year, but before that, the last 5 years, there wasn't very many IPOs and there wasn't very many M&A deals happening. So if you think about it from our LP perspective, they have certain allocations to venture, they have certain allocations to real estate, to hedge funds, et cetera. And if they don't have money flowing back in, then they get overweight venture. And so my point being, I think if you're a founder who is not in the AI space, my feedback would be, think about fundraising maybe 3 or 6 months earlier than you would have before, because that journey might take 50%, maybe 100% more meetings than you would have taken previously, and just expect it to be a little bit harder of a journey. Now, absolutely, you can still raise money if you're not an AI company today, but I think the reality is it is harder to do. But then if you are in that AI space and you're an amazing rock star team and you can build that early momentum, we just heard from Anton at Lovable, like I think a great case study of what I'm trying to emphasize here. That company is barely more than a year old, fastest growing company maybe in the world ever, and everybody knows that product now. And that's the potential that I think AI has. And so I think those are the kind of things you want to balance, but there's a lot that happens behind the scenes. I'm sure you guys have a lot of things you could say too. But that's just one thing I would offer on the fundraising side.
Sophia?
Yeah, I would just say, I think it's always a really intense ride to be a founder. It's something you do with your heart and soul, and it takes a long time, and you need to really find your own kind of inner stamina, guidance, and energy to kind of truck through. So it's always been not for the heart fainted. But then today's climate, yes, the bar is raised. I think seeing the companies such as Lovable raises the bar for everyone. On the other hand, what we also see is that you have tools now that were not available a couple of years ago. So, when I was sitting in that little apartment with the Spotify crew, we had only so many hours of the data we could code. Today, you can code because you have an amazing opportunity with AI and agents, and you can produce so much more in a shorter space of time. So I would say the intensity is probably a bit higher, and my kind of thing that I always want to send off is like, nurture that inner core and that energy, because you're going to need it, and it's a long race. It's not
I feel like being a founder is like eating glass for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Sophia, you also said something when we spoke, actually with Sarah, I spoke about this, your assistant. There's one KPI that is more important now than ever when it comes to revenue. Would you want to say more about that? A lot of companies, of course, are pre-revenue, and we please keep the question coming, because we want to engage with you all. But let's say you have revenue, but there's one, back to AI companies, let's talk about WhatsApp and others. Not a lot of employees, but a lot of revenue. So there's one KPI saying revenue per employee instead of, right?
Yep. And I think that goes with what I see as the AI native companies. They are from the get-go normally younger, very few in the team. So if I look at and I compare, if I meet a company that are like, 65 people and the output is similar to a team that has 6 people, of course that's a massive difference. And I think that's the new generation of founders are more in that mindset. So that is something that is important, but I think as an investor you look for diversity in your type of investments, and you need a bit of both. But that's definitely a KPI that's much more discussed now than a couple of years ago, just because of the power of the technology.
Bastian, Index, what are you thinking about this?
Yeah, we frequently try to take the time to step back and think about what is changing and what actually stays the same. And more often than not, the realization is that much more stays the same than actually changes. It feels always in super cycles like with AI that the whole world is changing and that companies are being built differently and that you have to evaluate companies in a different way. At least for the way that we operate, it's not the case. So we continue to look at the team that's the like by far the most important like aspect of any company. I think it's very easy to be distracted by some of the revenue growth that we are seeing today, but revenue is a very delicate metric. You really have to understand how this revenue is composed, what is the margin structure associated with that revenue, and when you really like drill down into the details, we believe that the best companies or the best teams can always raise money. So for us, we don't really see that you have to grow in a different pace than you had to grow in the past. We don't, of course, AI is a hot sector, but we see companies in a variety of other sectors raising fantastic rounds too. So for us, we always try to stay like focused. What is the main thing? For us, it's the people behind these companies, and a lot of the other stuff that is happening around it is more noise, in our opinion, than it's not. So, yeah, that's how we think about it.
Bastian, I forgot to bring on stage a little book of yours, How to Win in US. If you go to Index Ventures, you can actually download it. It's like, how many pages long?
Few hundred pages long.
Few hundred pages, easy read. It's a really delightful piece of work. And you just updated it. Because why?
Well, we have launched the first version of Winning in the US 6 years ago or so. The idea was, so the realization was that you can only build a generational company if you think global from the very early days. So we asked the entrepreneurs that we worked with, asked us very frequently, well, how do we navigate this process of expanding geographically? So we thought, well, let's ask the ones who have done it successfully in the past. So we spoke with Daniel from Spotify, Peter at Adyen, the founders of King, and like many of the other European companies that have successfully scaled their business internationally, and try to condense all of the learnings in one book, one resource that entrepreneurs can take and learn from. And we thought, well, it's now a while ago since we launched the first version of this book. Let's talk to, on the one hand, these, like the large companies that have done it before, but also let's talk to all of the ones that have done it since, and what has changed. And what we found is that it is more often than ever that entrepreneurs think global from day one. And I think it's partly like related to what Luke said, that the world is more and more digital. I think for us, borders are something, I mean, we have different countries and there are different policies, but ultimately, if you want to build a category-defining company, you just have to think global from day one. And then you have to figure out, and that relates to what I said in the beginning, you have to figure out who you are as a founder and where you want to go, and really find your own way of succeeding on a global scale. And interestingly, talking to all of these successful founders, we found different archetypes of building a global business. So Spotify, as an example, we categorized under pendulum. So it's a setup where the executive team at scale is like not set only one geography, but it's basically moving between geographies. You might have the CEO in Europe, the CPO in the US, or the CTO in Europe, and the chief commercial officer in the US, and it's like really a balance between the two key geographies. And then others, like King, for example, like a fantastic gaming company, the creators behind Candy Crush, they follow a playbook we coined Telescope. So they really have all of their operations in Europe and only have a small business development team in the US. And that's a model that worked for them very well. So depending on the type of product that you are building, depending on the type of leader that you are, you have to define your own framework and playbook of how to expand geographically.
Thank you for that, Bastian. Before we continue, we have 3 questions from the audience, and I think we should take all of them, because we have actually time for that. Keep the question coming. So what do I need to show angels to gain interest pre-revenue if I'm launching a product later this year? What do I need to show? I want to launch a product, pre-revenue. What do I need to show?
I would say domain expertise,
Domain
is probably
expertise?
the most important thing, because at that point you don't have a lot of product traction. You really don't have a product probably at all. You have a concept for it, and an angel is probably going to make an investment based on you personally. They don't have an investment committee. They operate as individual investors. So your first 30-minute coffee with that person, making the impression that you have domain. They also may not know your space very well. So I think communicating domain expertise and why you have a right to win, and what your vision ultimately is, like that storytelling part. When you're raising angel and you're raising pre-seed and seed, it is almost entirely on the story. There's nothing else that you have to show on, so you need to convince somebody. And I think like your background and why you have experience in that category is probably the thing to lean in on.
So that's your unfair market advantage,
Yeah.
some competitive advantages. Sophia, storytelling. That's what you're an expertise in.
Yeah,
Before you, Spotify did not have a really strong story or narrative even.
I was lucky to be the global marketing director, and I helped craft the story and communicate the brand, what we stood for, etc. And I'm passionate about storytelling, and I think it's because it's so ingrained in society. That's what we have done since the early days. We've been sitting around a fire telling each other stories. And as a founder, I think it's important for many reasons. A, because you need to know who you are, as you were saying. You need to kind of communicate it clearly to yourself so that you have something to navigate from. And then when you are on your track to kind of attract super talent from across the globe, you need to be able to tell a very inspiring story so that they will actually pick you and come and join your company. And same for investors, and same for partnerships. Like, I think that is something you use all the time, more or less. It's a way of communicating who you are, where you want to go, without sounding too silly, but more authentic and real. So people get you. If they don't get you, they don't really know what they're signing up for. And people want to be part of something. They want to, get a feel for what you're building.
You told me, we had a fun conversation upstairs, backstage. If someone from Denmark pitch/storytell, versus someone from Finland, versus someone from US. You said something quite funny. What do you need to do as an investor?
So from my experience, I think that in the Nordics, we're not as good as the Americans to tell our story. I think Swedes and Danes are a little bit better. The Finnish crowd, I think there's a lot to work on there. But on the other hand, Finns are always the ones delivering, very steady, very reliable. I trust my Finnish community. When I got to the US, there were a lot of people really good at storytelling. I was kind of young and naive and like blown away by these amazing people that we were able to hire. But then later on, slightly disappointed because the delivery was not on top. They were not as solid as some of my Nordic colleagues. So I think kind of scaling off 20% of the that performance in what they're communicating that they can. Some cultural differences to take into consideration. But we were also always saying at Spotify that the combination of like a love child between the US and the Nordics is a really strong character, because then you have the solidness and sort of always over-delivering in combination with the storytelling and energy and charisma.
Yeah.
Bastian, if I'm pre-revenue and I want to launch a product, what is the advice you want to give me as a founder?
I think I can only repeat what I said before. I think figuring out who you are as an entrepreneur and where you want to go, like what drives you, what motivates you, and why should you be the person to build this company and to like change the world in some way by building this company. That's the core thing. And I think that's the core thing at any stage. It becomes like the focus shifts slightly as the company grows. Like as soon as you have a product, you have revenue or at least users, and you can like show what the product is doing out there in the wild. It helps to support your story, but ultimately this will always be the key aspect of like partnering with investors that will help you on the way.
When I started my software company, I remember my first Czech investor, a very prominent investor in the US. I will leave his name out. But to my surprise, I did a really good pre-seed round, almost $2 million right out of the gate. But the interesting part is he said, Soulaima, it's such a good thing that you have no traction. And I said, why is that a good thing? He says, because we can all be hopeful on your behalf. So no traction was actually an advantage for me. Instead of when you have a little bit of bumpy traction and you're not having the month-over-month growth. And so I'm just saying it's a very different environment in Silicon Valley, definitely. We have two more questions. In your perspective, what type of AI native company will remain relevant the next 3 to 5 years? Oh my God. What is the prophecy here? Luke?
So I'll answer it this way. I think VCs get in trouble when we try and predict the future too much. Like, this category is so new. The way we approach it and the way I think about it is we're just looking for people who have high energy, who are creative, who are going to be working with this technology every single day and are following the latest releases of the next models and new applications that are built, and building network with those founders of those companies and integrating their products. Like, founders are the ones who ultimately build the future. I think VCs, we get in trouble sometimes when we try and predict and force fit too much. So I don't really have an answer for this one, other than like, if you're young, scrappy, energetic, like enthusiastic, and have like a background either in computer programming or if you're building at the product layer, have a product background, something that says you can build product and ship product. That, to me, teams that iterate quickly, I would love to invest in those teams early and do 50 of those investments, then pick 1 or 2 and say, with certainty in the next 5 years, this is what the future is going to look like. So.
And it's never been easier. I'm a non-technical founder, and the hilarious thing is my product became the best AI product last year in US with 500,000 votes, and I'm not technical. But I can thank AI products for that, right? That you can actually vibe code and you can do stuff. It's so fun. What about pivots? What do you feel about pivots? You invest in one company, and then through 2-3 years later, they've done 12 pivots. Is that okay?
Absolutely okay. I mean, the name of the game is finding product market fit, and if you invest early, sometimes you invest before that happens. But great teams they follow where the market is, they listen to their users, they get feedback from their customers, and then they adapt and they make adjustments. And so it's absolutely critical, I think, in the early days and over the course of a company's life cycle. Even if you're a late stage company, you have to think about your next product and how you stay relevant for the next release, the next ship. And so I think it's core to successful teams. They're always thinking about how they grow their existing product or how they pivot their business to find product market fit.
Sophia? In your perspective, what type of AI native company will be the most relevant in the next 3-5 years?
Yeah, I mean, hard to predict. We don't really know where things are going. But I think one skill that is more important is to stay super close to technology and the new models. And I see that happening in different ways, but some of the most impressive founders that I know have developed really strong relationships with the companies such as OpenAI, etc., in order to stay close and know how to build with what's coming in mind.
Bastian, quickly.
The companies that provide value. I think that's the most important thing, right? There's almost, especially at the moment, there's a lot of noise of companies that gain a lot of traction, whether that's revenue traction or usage, but ultimately they don't really stick around because there's no underlying value that these products provide. So I think as long as you focus on what provides value to...
Value over revenue even?
Totally. I think revenue is a derivative of value.
I love it so much. We are almost out of time. We have 1 minute and 20 seconds left, if I'm not wrong. Any last fire chats, good advice for all the founders here, or even inspiring new investors? Luke?
I just think there's a lot of things happening in the world today. We talked about the political topic. I think control what you can control and be optimistic is and look, it's not easy to do that all the time. There's times where I look at investments I've made and I'm like, wow, this company struggling here, this one's struggling there. There's a lot of things happening in the world that we don't feel super great about. But at the end of the day, we feel very privileged to have the jobs that we have, to have the opportunity to go and build product and invest in companies. And I just try and remind myself of that. And that'd be what I'd share with people building companies today.
So pressure is a privilege.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah,
Sophia?
Similar note. I think it's a long-term game, so make sure you have your ways of dealing with the stress so that you don't kind of burn out or get too drained. It's a beautiful, fun job to be in innovation. We can drive change for the better of society. Yes, sometimes it's incredibly demotivating with political stuff going on in the US, but we need to think ahead, and we cannot be passive. That's when we have failed. We need to be proactive, and we need to build for a better future. And in order to do so, we need to stay strong. It's not a sprint; it's a marathon. So get your exercise regime in order, or learn to meditate, but stay
Go
strong
in the garden,
and
play an
long.
instrument and all that. Bastian, you get the honor of closing this panel. Any good advice?
I'm doubling down of what Luke and Sophia said. And I think it ultimately, again, always comes down to just figuring out who you are. And I've been chatting with Ivan, the founder of Notion, a couple of weeks ago, and discussed with him when he does angel investments, how does he think about the different founders he partners with? And he said, well, there are, in his opinion, fundamentally two different types of founders. One that is focused on the craft and the value that a product provides and is really driven based on this. And then the other archetype that is focused on winning. And both can be super successful archetypes of founders. You just have to figure out which one you are in order to succeed. So, yeah.
Thank you, Bastian. Thank you so much. Go get the PDF file from Index Ventures. Thank you, Luke, Sophia, and Bastian. Thank you so much for coming today.